why it's important to be organized. And I think the biggest thing here is that it's really fuel for profitable decision making. And without having the information in your hands to make decisions, it's pretty hard to make accurate decisions, and it's a little bit more of a gamble, and there's enough gambling in farming as is. There's new technology that's come out, especially in the bookkeeping world, that can help you record those things very quickly so that it takes the that organization piece of trying to keep track of all the paper
Right.
out a little bit. So when you're in the truck, you can take a picture right away. When you get into your truck, take a picture of that receipt, and it'll automatically be recorded in your books. So if there's a loan specifically that there's going to be fees if you make a lump sum payment, right? Having that separated makes it easy to make a decision when you have some excess cash and I want to start paying off some of these loans. Which loans do I tackle first?
Welcome to the Farm Family Harmony podcast. I'm Elaine Fraze, Farm Family Coach, here with another episode full of transition tips, tactics, and sometimes hard truths to get harmony on your farm. Hey there, folks. Welcome back to Farm Family Harmony podcast. It's Elaine Fraze, Farm Family Coach, and I'm excited today because you get to meet for the very first time Alyssa Brown. And Alyssa is our newest teammate at Farm Family Coach, and she's a CPA working out of Olds, Alberta. She's a mom and a partner, a spouse, and all kinds of good things are happening in her life because she's here today to talk about practical strategies for getting more organized financially on your farm or in your farm business or whatever kind of business you might have at the moment. Because I know some of you listening are packaging up beef and some of you are doing all kinds of other interesting rural entrepreneurship things. So Alyssa, to get started, tell us a little bit about your story and how did you end up in Old Alberta at an accounting office?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, first of all. So yeah, I actually grew up on a farm east of town, east of Olds, about a half hour. So I'm the our myself and my siblings were the fifth generation on the farm. So this is kind of home, but we kind of bounced around a bit before we settled back here in Olds. I went up to Edmonton for 5 years and did my Bachelor of Commerce degree, and then ended up moving to Lethbridge for about 3 years.
The whole province.
Yes, sure, yeah, yeah. And so my husband did some schooling there as well, and I was working at a bigger accounting firm down there. And then I was also doing my master's online while we were down there, and then decided that it was time to be closer to family. We were driving back every other weekend, and it was a lot. We were tired, but we still wanted to see family because we really like our family. So so we decided, yeah, it was time to come back home, and so yeah, we moved back here just about 3 years ago. So and we're loving it.
Right. And you're involved in an accounting firm in Olds called Stutenberg. And
Yeah.
you're also part of our team. So you come to our membership coaching sessions on Tuesdays, sometimes during the day, sometimes in the evenings, in our membership site, which is really valuable, Alyssa, because in farm transition, there's lots of things to do and decide about accounting and the tactics and money. So today, let's focus on it's the start of a new year, sort of. When this airs, it'll be sometime in February. People are starting to think, well, I better get myself organized for my income taxes. And what what what's the first step for your encouragement for practical strategies for getting financially organized? What's really important?
Well, I think the first thing to think about is why it's important to be organized. And I think the biggest thing here is that it's really fuel for profitable decision making. And without having the information in your hands to make decisions, it's pretty hard to make accurate decisions. And it's a little bit more of a gamble. And there's enough gambling in farming as is. You got, all the price differences every year, and weather alone is a big gamble. So having that accurate information can really help, especially when you need to make quick decisions, right? We don't have time to go back and update the bookkeeping for 2 years and then make a decision. It's a lot of times you have to make a decision within a week. And what does that look like, right? So
Yeah. A neighbor walks up to your farm and says, "Hey, I want to sell you some equipment, or I want to sell you some land, or to make the most of an opportunity." So someone, I don't know who this is attributed to, says you can't change what you can't measure. So if you have good bookkeeping and good accounting and good organization, then you're going to be able to make what you say are profitable decisions. Now, I'm old enough to be your mom. So some people in my generation, in our late 60s or whatever, are very paper-based. So I have brought as a prop here my deposit book just to tease people a bit, because I like to have stuff written down in more than one place, because the way I work, I have a separate business corporate account from my personal account, which I think you also highly recommend, that you don't commingle the
no.
giving account with the farm account, right? So that would be job one for anybody listening to this. If your accounts are all mishmashed together, time to start a new process to do that. But
Yeah, you bet.
the reason I brought my deposit book to the fore is you also mentioned the importance of embracing new technology, like how to use your phone to do accounting. So do you explain that?
Yeah, yeah. So the technology world is advancing so quickly, and I feel like it's starting to catch up to what farmers really need. And there's so many seasons where you're jumping in, it's middle of harvest, you jump into a truck and there's an important receipt sitting on the seat next to you. And how do you keep track of all those things? And it's not that people are lazy, it's just that people are busy. And it's
Moving quickly.
hard to keep track of everything. So there's new technology that's come out, especially in the bookkeeping world, that can help you record those things very quickly so that it takes um, that organization piece of trying to keep track of all the paper
Right.
out a little bit. So when you're in the truck, you can take a picture right away when you get into your truck. Take a picture of that receipt, and it'll automatically be recorded in your books. You'll still have to go back and double check to make sure it's been allocated correctly and that, GST was picked up properly. But at least it's in there, right? It's not this floating piece of paper somewhere that if it falls out of the truck, how do you remember? Well, you go back to your bank statements. But then what if you paid for it with your personal money and it was a farm expense, right?
And
How do you? Yeah,
okay,
right.
and that's what I do when I go and run errands. If I don't have the farm credit card with me, our farm bookkeeper always has to reimburse me personally for what I, paid, which should have been a farm expense. Now, one of the softwares that I was playing around with, I don't use it now, is called Dex, that I think another accounting firm uses. Do you have, as an accountant, do you have an accounting software that you really like?
There's a few of them that I think are attempting to do the same thing, and it totally depends on which accounting software you're using for your bookkeeping. So it's a kind of a hard question to answer because, if you're using QuickBooks Online, there might be a specific program that you may want to use there. But if you're using some other ag specific accounting software programs, then it might not be totally perfect. Like it might not be a great fit for that specific accounting software. So our office, we've been working with Dext with our QuickBooks Online individuals. And so we're kind of in the middle of working that integration within our own office bookkeeping. So, but yeah, there's lots of different programs, I guess.
Well, I think it doesn't really matter so much, Alyssa, what you use. I think the key practical strategy here is consistency and timeliness. Like you can have all the newfangled blinging ding dong things to use, but if you don't act, like the mantra in business is focus and execute. So get it done in a timely fashion, right? And keep it up to date. And you know, one paper copy of this goes to me, is stays with me. The other one is with my bookkeeper, and I use QuickBooks as well. I have been using QuickBooks since it ever came out, which is decades ago. So what about tracking every transaction? How do you get better organized about that? So the phone, using the phone is one way. What are some other ways? And that's, you know, not making
Yeah.
the cash. Like, what if there's no cash trade? Like in an article you wrote, you said, what if you traded in a piece of equipment and there was no cash that went out?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's a piece that can slip away, right? If we're using the bank statements as the last check, you know, the bank balance is good. We have everything. But I think it's important to take a step back and say, do we have everything? You like farmers know their business more than or should know their business more than their accounts, right? In theory.
But
So,
Mhm. Go ahead.
um, so taking a step back and thinking about what happened in this last year, I've seen farmers who traded a piece of land with a neighbor and said, you know, it's about the same value, so we're just going to trade it straight across. And
No
never
touch.
told their account about it, right?
Ouch.
So so after the fact, he says, "Oh, well, I don't actually have that land anymore. I traded it back in, 2019. Traded it with who? How much, right? And now we have to go back and deal with the tax treatments of this because we didn't know about it at the time that his books were done, right? So, um, I don't I don't know if it is the same for every individual, if there's a way to keep it totally organized, but even if it's keeping a log of some of these things, keeping a log of the non-cash transactions and then also the transactions that you're paying for with your personal money that needs to be recorded in the business. If something happens that's not going to be on the bank statement, it needs to be somewhere else organized and consistent.
Yeah, so your message is how to document that. And you know, I'll give a personal example is charitable giving. I have that as a report in my QuickBooks, but there's other charitable giving that other people make decisions on that's done with my money, which sounds a bit odd, but there's a reason for that. But I kept a Word document this year. And every time there was a charitable transaction done, it's in a Word document so that and that Word document can be replaced and refreshed as you go. I'm even thinking of guys on their phones when they think they're so busy of just emailing themselves, just emailing themselves a note, right? So that when they do sit down and have time to collect what's gone on in that month or whatever, they can file that into non-cash transactions folder. But switching land and forgetting to tell your accountant, that's almost unbelievable. But that's why you're here, Alyssa, because people need to hear. And a lot of people say, oh, Elaine, I already know that stuff. Great. If you're doing things well, that's wonderful. But in my mind's eye, I can hear or see a young farmer listening to us right now, and he or she is pulling her hair out because she's trying to get the team better organized, but they're not cooperating. And so one of the things we've done on our farm is all the banking books that, you know, go back and forth making deposits at the bank ever since the year 2000, which was a long time ago. We still use the same portfolio that we got at a conference, and all the checkbook, everything's in there. And people don't even write a whole lot of checks anymore. There's a lot of stuff by e-transfer, but just to consolidate in a physical way, this is very important. This is always kept in a very safe place, and only certain people get to touch this, right? And to use that. So talk to me about tracking things between the fixed costs, like the lovely things like debt and mortgages, versus the stuff that variable from month to month. When Wes and I were first married, Alyssa, and you will laugh at this, but over 40 years ago when we got married and started buying land, we kept track of all of our loans in a little yellow Hilroy grade 1 scribbler. And I had to go back to that because my accountant wanted to know, just like you said, what year, to keep an inventory of what year you bought land and what's the value of it now, right? Because that's a whole capital gains issue.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we've been struggling with that this year, as I'm sure a lot of people have been. that's been a whole beast of its own, the capital gains changes this year. But yeah, I think the important piece with tracking your fixed costs, like you said, like your mortgage payments, equipment payments, basically anything that is not going to change depending on what acres you plant and with what, or how many cows you feed. So the things that, whether you put a crop in or not, you still have to make those payments.
Right.
Breaking that out and understanding what that looks like and how much cash is required to cover those fixed costs is really important to make sure that we have the cash that we need to keep the business moving forward. And it might be hard to put cash aside to cover some of those fixed costs, but if we know, at least know how much cash is required to make sure that we're making our loan payments and that we can keep the farm for one more year, right? Um, then at least we can start to make decisions to make sure that we can service those loans appropriately. Because otherwise, we can get stuck in this over-financing snowball effect, where if we don't have enough cash to cover these fixed costs, well, what do we have to do? We have to get more money somewhere. So we need to go and get some more credit. And now we've got bigger fixed cost loan payments that we got to make. And now we just need more cash next year to service those same loans. So it can become a little bit crippling if we're over relying on debt. And not all debt is bad. That's not what I'm saying, because there can be a very real great use for debt on the farm. And I don't know if a debt-free farm is the right goal for everybody. But at least knowing what cash is required to make sure that that debt and all the other, utilities, for example, if you're not in your shop all year, well, you can't let it freeze up, right? So you still got to make those payments to keep the shop hot. So
And to also keep people happy when they're fixing things and getting equipment ready all winter.
exactly.
What's the organization tip then with fixed costs and variable costs? Do you have lots of your favorite clients who are really good with spreadsheets, or how do you see them organizing themselves to be really good at that?
Yeah, I think spreadsheets is a good. I mean, I see lots of handwritten ledgers, and that's fine. The issue becomes, do they actually add up, right? When we're doing lots of manual calculations, there's more room for human error. I think spreadsheets are great because we can use formulas, and if we change one number, we don't have to go through and change all of the other numbers, right? So, I have seen some very elaborate spreadsheets, and spreadsheets that I would have no clue how to make, because people can get so creative with it. And I think it comes down to what makes the most sense for each individual farm operation. If you just need a list of, these are my loans, these are my payments, this is what it's going to be, total it up, that's how much cash I know that I'm going to need for this next year, that's enough. It doesn't have to be a crazy spreadsheet, right? So yeah.
In our case, it's this calendar. Back here's Alyssa. It was a calendar, and the favorite days were November 1st and May 1st because those are great days to make land payments, right? And now, of course, that's a whole other thing because land payments are like so huge, and that's a huge hit for farm families for their cash flow.
Yeah, and I think one more piece to add there is, another useful piece of information to include on that spreadsheet would be specific loan terms that might be um,
Important.
make it yeah, that would change maybe the way that you handle your cash. So if there's a loan specifically that there's going to be fees if you make a lump sum payment, right? Having that separated makes it easy to make a decision when you have some excess cash and I want to start paying off some of these loans. Which loans do I tackle first? It's easy to just go to the high interest loan, right? Let's pay the loan with the most interest. Yeah, that makes sense. But what if you make a payment on that loan and now you get extra fees? Was it really Was it really helpful? Or maybe there's a loan that, only has $50,000 left on this loan. And once we pay off that loan, we can use the cash that was previously being used to pay off this loan to service some of the other debt next year and help smooth out the cash flow needs for next year as well. So it's not always cut and dry. So having some of those details in there might be helpful.
So, Alyssa, you're part of our farm family coach team, and you've seen the angst and the tension between the generations around money. And in this conversation that we're having right now about which loan do we pay off first, how much time do you spend as an accountant helping educate and increase the financial literacy of all the generations sitting across the desk from you? Because I'm thinking of a new spouse coming into a farm operation, and she is just totally like, and I'm thinking in my own case, my daughter-in-law, when land payments were having to be made, just sitting down and helping comfort her and educate her around cash flow and around operating loans and current and intermediate and long-term debt. Is that also part of organization in terms of showing and opening the books up to those who just want to be kept in the loop? They don't have to know the nitty-gritty. They just have to know this is a good farm. It pays its bills. It manages its cash flow. Do you ever have that opportunity as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think financial transparency is very important, especially if you're considering rolling your farm to the next generation anytime soon. I think it's important. And when I say soon, I'm thinking in the next 10 years. So soon is relative. Soon is relative.
Relative term.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's important. And one thing that I do appreciate about the firm that I'm at, Stoutenberg, is we really do focus on taking extra time at the end of the year, going through the financial statements, and we go through it line by line. And if there's any questions, we address it right there. And of course, if there's questions that come up after, we can always address them. But it surprises me that not everybody is doing that. The amount of times that I hear from people, oh my goodness, I've never had my financial statements explained to me before.
Mhm.
And that makes me think, who is your advisor? Who are you getting assistance from? Because it's not just about filing your taxes. That should be the minimum. Staying compliant with filing obligations is the base. That's not job well done, check mark, we're good to go for the year. It should be okay, now that we've done that, what can we springboard off of for this next year? And taking that time to go through it, not just with the founders, because in a lot of cases, their children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews or whatever are starting to step into the operations, and they need to know what it looks like, what cash is actually required to run this operation, and how are we getting that cash? How are the different avenues of farming servicing different expenses, right? Those things are important to know. Why are we focusing on selling this grain this year? Well, here's why, right?
Yeah, and I think, Alyssa, I had another conversation with a millennial farm woman in agriculture yesterday from Nebraska. And she said, Elaine, we millennial farmers have much more openness around the finances than the older generation has had in the past. And so, Alyssa, I think that's great that you are using the education piece in your practice as well to help young farmers and older farmers, because I have seen older farmers who didn't even know what a tax-free savings account was, and I was shocked. But I shouldn't be, right? Because we're all on different learning paths, and so there's no judgment here. But my curiosity is, where would you send someone to learn more about having better financial organization and literacy? Online courses, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think there are courses out there. I think the most important piece is that farmers should be really focusing on creating a team of advisors. And accounts are a part of that, but they're not all of it, right? There's other financial planners that you can go to. Staying in close connection with your lawyer as well, because everything's connected, right?
Telling him you bought land or switched.
Yeah, that's important. That's important. So I think creating a team of advisors is very important because farmers are very skilled at a lot of different things. And I'm consistently impressed with all the things that are all the skills that are attained while people are on the farm. I mean, even like I think about my own life growing up on the farm. Um, I spent a lot of time in the kitchen with my mom making food for seeding, harvest, all the crew and all that. And not only did I get some really amazing time with my mom, but when I moved out, I felt like I could cook for 50 to 100 people no problem because I've done it before, right? Like it's not that challenging when you've grown up in that environment. So um that being said, like I think there's so many skills in farming, but there's a reason why I went to school for 7 years, right? It's so that I can help farmers and I can help people. And unless farmers are going to school for 7 years, not that that's the goal or anything, but there are things that people can add, and we can't know everything. It's impossible. I can't go onto a farm and know how to run that business. It doesn't work that way. And same thing, it's impossible for a farmer to keep up with all of the tax changes that might affect them, right? So I think it's important to like your accountant too, because it should be a long relationship. This isn't a this year I'm going to file my taxes with this person and, you know, to create the real value, I think comes in connecting well with your advisors, working with them over a period of time, and through that you just start to absorb lots of different information that's going to be helpful to making smart decisions on the farm and staying organized. And when the books are up to date and you're in constant communication with your accountant, there's so much planning opportunities, right? There's so many rules out there that just require time, right? Like even just thinking about making sure that your land qualifies to roll over to the next generation on a tax deferred basis. There's a time period that you have to hold that land for. And if you're thinking that you're going to buy land from so and so and roll it over to your kids within a year, like you got to stay in communication with your advisors about these pieces. Otherwise, it could be real dollars that are being missed here. So,
I think the other thing too in our coaching practice, sometimes we like to use the picture in people's mind's eye of a Princess Auto tin oil funnel. And the work that we do as coaches is at the top of the funnel, which is things like finding out what everybody needs for income streams or where they want to live or what fairness looks like to them. So all the facilitation around the emotional factors that affect planning. But then the work you do, Alyssa, is more down in the funnel piece, which is the tactics and what we call, and even in this conversation we're having around practical strategies for being organized. Those are things that you know from your experience as an accountant and also your practice and people you've shared with. And you will learn so much from your clients, right? Because they walk in and they present themselves or you visit them on their farms and you see how different people make different decisions based on data. And the other thing our accounting office does, which I find quite interesting, is benchmarking so that our farm can also see how we're doing in comparison to other grain farms, which is good to know that, you should give yourself kind of like a gold star or an A report card when you go and get your taxes done. But what is it about farmers not wanting to pay tax? Because I think I just need it to come out of your mouth as the accountant that you can't. And we've had this conversation internally on our team because we have some people who are very closed off to building their team of advisors, getting a tax specialist, having a financial planner to look at their income stream as they age in place on the farm. And they're just in a very narrow lane with one advisor. So What would you say to the again, I'm thinking of the young farmers listening to them and say, "Elaine, my dad just does everything to avoid tax, and it's just not helping us."
Yeah, I think that's a very common issue. And I think the important piece to understand is that paying tax is not bad. It actually means that you're making money, right? So obviously, yes, that's a good thing. Obviously, nobody wants to pay extra tax, right? That's where we come in. We want to make that bill as small as possible. But it does come at a cost, right? Because there's so much planning opportunities that we have with farms specifically. And assuming your books are up to date and we're, keeping up with things every year, that's step 1. And then, we have to look at the long-term plan, right? What does 10 years look like? Is the farm Are we thinking about rolling the farm to the next generation? Or is there somebody to roll it to, right? Or is it going to be, are we going to have to start selling things off in 10 years or so when we're just too tired to keep going? And if that's the case, paying tax now and paying it over 10 years is a lot cheaper than waiting until the last possible second and then being stuck with a massive, massive tax bill. So, in fact, I even just had this conversation with a farmer the other day that we need to start paying some tax because in the long run, it's actually going to be less tax. If we start paying now, we start, bumping up the income just a little bit. Let's start using some of the beautiful small business rates, right? Let's take advantage of that while we have it over the next 10 years. And then when it comes time to execute some of these things, we're not going to hurt quite so bad with that big tax bill. And even when I've heard farmers say, you know, my kids can deal with the taxes. That's their problem,
Well,
right?
thanks a lot, mom and dad. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. That's a lot to put on the next generation. Like this isn't small money, right? These are big tax bills that we're dealing with here. And I think that it's getting increasingly more difficult for the next generation to continue farming, right? It's becoming more and more expensive. Land is becoming more and more expensive. And if we're just pushing these tax bills onto the next generation, is the farm actually going to be able to sustain, right? Like we have to, if we want this farm to be around for the next 2, 3 generations and further, we can't just push everything off to the next generation. Otherwise, that's where it ends, right?
Right, and so I think we should, let that sit for a while, Alyssa. That's a hard thing, but we know you are from a farm, I'm a farm partner as well. We know in the culture of agriculture that people are multi-skilled and they can do hard things, but they don't have to do them alone. So I wanna thank you just for your practicality around just reminding our listeners that, there's new digital tools, even using your smartphone to do the DEX thing to put receipts and things quickly where they might be and reallocate them later. The importance of looking at separating your personal bank account from your farm account, and also just what you've ended with, talking openly with each other between the generations as to what the consequences of what I call delayed decision making, pushing and deferring things down the road into the future when you're saying, you know what, let's start paying more tax now. And so over the long term, it will actually be less. And that requires a planning window. So, what's your closing thought, Alyssa, for a young farmer listening to this who wants to get the older generation to the table to get better financially organized and just start this planning window for you, which you said was 10 years, which is not unreasonable. Our son came back to the farm, I think, when he was 25-ish. He's now 36. Guess what? 11 years has gone by.
Mhm.
And it's okay because things have, in order to become a corp, you have to be a partnership first, right? And then you're a corp, and then you have other things that you can use as tax strategies and planning strategies to have different operating companies. And those are all the things that you're a wizard at doing. And I can only talk about the concepts in a big perspective, but we haven't died this morning talking about money. Also the message, right? It's not going to kill you. And it's not bad to talk about what money means to you and what you want money to do for you, for your family and your farm for over the next 10 years and to the succeeding generations. So what's your parting shot of encouragement for the young farmers listening to this? How can they get their families to come to the table to be better financially organized? What would you recommend they do first?
Well, I think the first thought here is that I have yet to meet a farmer that doesn't care about the long-term position of the farm.
Right.
You know, even if they're saying that's not my problem, that's your problem in the future. We don't need to talk about that. Like you'll just make a decision after I'm dead. I've heard those conversations many times before. But what I think some people don't understand is the importance of making these decisions now is going to impact the long-term profitability of this farm, and not just profitability, but like sustainability. Is this going to actually work for the next generation? And I think that's an important piece to discuss with the founding generation, that the reason why I want to talk to you about this is not because I'm trying to grab for money, right?
Push you.
Yeah. I'm not trying to push you out. I'm not trying to take everything over.
A gold digger.
Exactly. What I'm looking for here is to make sure that this transition keeps the farm afloat, and not just for myself, but for my kids and their kids. And I know that that's important to a lot of people, but making that connection between us having a conversation about this right now and the long-term profitability of the farm, those things are hard to connect, but that's really what this is, right? Like doing planning for this next 10 years is going to directly impact that. So if it's a tough conversation, maybe making that connection is going to help get a little bit more buy-in from everybody, that this isn't about me. This is about the farm. This is about making sure that the farm can succeed. And if staying financially organized is a huge headache and you're very overwhelmed by keeping up with the books and, not really sure where to start, it's totally okay to have somebody else step in and take care of the books for a while you get your feet on the ground. I think that's that's what we're here for. That's what bookkeepers are here for. That's what your account is here for, to help you with. And you don't have to do it on your own. That's why you need a team of advisors. It's okay to get help. It's not it's not a bad thing. Quite frankly, I think that more people should be using bookkeepers to help them stay up to date, because it's costing them too much not to. So,
Leaving
yeah.
lots of. And again, we can't might don't wanna say this too far and wide, but I have to say it to be true to what I hear from the farm families we're working for and with, is that many families are also concerned, Alyssa, about the price of having and investing in good advice. And I tell, my husband all the time with one of my subcontractors where they do 120 hours of work for me a month sometimes, but they itemize absolutely everything that those 8 people on that team have done for our farm family coach business. I have no problem paying that bill because I can see all the work that's been done. And so my challenge also in this podcast to any accountants and advisors listening here is that your farmers will be much happier paying you in a timely basis when they actually understand what you've done together for them. And so that's just a personal message I want to have too. Not only do farmers need to keep organized, but it would help us if our advisors were very transparent on here's the time spent, this is the billable rate, and this is what we've accomplished. And I think that everybody's happier when they have a deep sense that there's been a fair exchange of value and people's time. And there's a great book that I'll just end on by Dan Martell called Buy Back Your Time. And Alyssa, you're a busy professional and a young mom and a partner. You've got all kinds of stuff going on. And I'm sure there's things that you now outsource or would want to outsource so that you can spend time doing the things that you're gifted at doing. So thanks so much for all the examples today. I love your passion and I love the fact that you know how to speak millennial. It's just awesome. We'll ask folks if you liked what you heard today with Alyssa. She's part of our team. You're welcome to go to farmfamilycoach.com and sign up for our wait list for our membership site. The cart will open again in October, and we have 55 families right now. They're enjoying lots of these kinds of discussions, one-to-one in the breakout rooms, and also these podcasts. The best thing that you can do is share this with a friend, share it with your parents, and let's make agriculture unstoppable and better organized. We'll see you next. Bye for now.